In the 1920s, Prohibition had a significant impact on society. The 18th Amendment, which made selling, making, and transporting alcohol illegal, started in 1920 and ended in 1933, but was ratified on January 16, 1919, and would take effect on January 17, 1920. Also, you had people who were for Prohibition, like Carrie Nation, who would go to saloons and smash all the alcohol in them with her hatchet, and then supporters of the 18th Amendment tried to have the Bible rewritten by removing all references about alcohol. Then you had people and places who weren't for it, which were bootleggers and speakeasies. Bootleggers were people who would transport alcoholic beverages where they weren't allowed. Then you have speakeasies, which are establishments who sold alcohol during the Prohibition era. They got their name because you would have to whisper a code word or name through a locked door in order to be allowed in. There were over 30,000 speakeasies in New York alone. Then you had companies who had to come up with something else to sell besides alcohol, like Yingling, who started up an ice cream dairy plant and made ice cream until 1985. The reason why they banned alcohol is because it reduced crime and corruption, solved social problems, and reduced the tax burden that was created. Prohibition only lasted 13 years and ended because it led bootleggers, speakeasies, and also organized crime, which Al Capone, who is the most infamous gangster in American history, made $60 million in alcohol sales in just 1927 alone, and made all that money from bootlegging and domination of organized crime. Another major event in the 1920s was the Great Depression. The Great Depression led to millions of people being homeless and jobless in America. These homeless people built little towns called Hoovervilles during the Great Depression. Hoovervilles are shanty towns made of shacks that were built by the unemployed. They were called Hoovervilles because President Hoover was taking all of the blame for the Great Depression, which is what caused people to live in Hoovervilles. President Hoover was being blamed because shortly after he was elected, the United States stock market crashed, and his response to the crisis was constrained by his conservative political philosophy. He reportedly vetoed several bills that would have given immediate relief for suffering Americans. The living conditions in the Hoovervilles were very poor. The people had to live in shacks constructed of unwanted materials, and the shacks lacked the most basic amenities. People had to use newspapers for blankets. These blankets were referred to as Hoover blankets. The people that lived in Hoovervilles show that they were desperate in economic status by flying something called a Hoover flag, which is a pocket turned inside out. During this time, many other makeshift things were created, like Hoover leather, which was cardboard put into the bottoms of shoes for when the soles had holes in them. Also, when people could no longer afford to put gas in their cars, they would tie horses to the front of the vehicle, and these were called Hoover wagons. The largest Hooverville was in Riverside Park of New York City. Another very large Hooverville was in Seattle. All Hoovervilles were eradicated at the end of the Great Depression.